It was just past dusk when Daniel Everett, a quiet man in his 40s who had traded the buzz of city life for the deep silence of a forest cabin, was hiking along the cliffs of Pine Ridge, camera slung over his shoulder, in search of rare birds to photograph for his personal nature blog, when suddenly a sharp, guttural cry ripped through the stillness, freezing him in his tracks. It wasn't a bird, not even close, but a sound so raw and primal it made the hairs on the back of his neck rise, and instinctively he moved toward the source, heart pounding, stumbling over wet rocks slick with mist until he reached the precipice and saw something that made his breath catch. A white Bengal tiger, majestic and ghost-like, clinging desperately to a crumbling ledge, her claws scrabbling against loose earth, her powerful body slipping inch by inch towards certain death hundreds of feet below, and for a moment, Daniel could only stare, awestruck by her beauty and horror-struck by her peril, until adrenaline overtook wonder and he dropped to his stomach, inching forward, arm outstretched, voice steady but urgent, as if the tiger might understand. "Hold on, girl, I got you." Insane, irrational words, but somehow they made sense in that frozen moment between life and death. He looped his camera strap around a jutting root, anchoring himself, then reached further, barely touching her fur, praying for a miracle, and with a sudden surge of strength he didn't know he had, he grabbed the thick scruff of her neck and heaved, legs burning, teeth clenched, until, against all logic and nature, he pulled her up over the edge, where she collapsed, panting, bleeding from her paws, her luminous golden eyes locked onto his with an expression that felt too human to explain. Not quite fear, not quite gratitude, but something ancient and unspoken. They sat there, two living creatures breathing heavily in the wet grass, until she slowly rose, gave one last look at him, and vanished into the shadows of the forest without a sound, leaving Daniel stunned, soaked, and shivering but alive, his heart racing with the knowledge that he just saved a creature whose kind was nearly extinct, something wild and sacred. The next morning, nursing sore muscles and sipping black coffee on his creaky front porch, Daniel expected nothing more exciting than the usual squirrel chatter and rustling leaves. But as the fog lifted with the rising sun, he blinked hard and nearly dropped his mug, because there, not 20 feet from his porch steps, standing like a ghost made flesh, was the same white tiger, calm and silent as a statue, her massive form bathed in golden morning light, and beside her, impossibly, were three cubs, small and striped like her, but wide-eyed with curiosity, tumbling clumsily through the grass as she stood sentinel, watching him with the same deep, unreadable eyes. He didn't move, barely dared to breathe, until one of the cubs, braver or more foolish than the others, bounded up the porch steps, sniffing at the bowl of water he'd left for raccoons, before looking up at Daniel with a blink that melted the last of his disbelief into wonder. For the next several weeks, the tiger, whom Daniel had come to call Nira, an old name meaning strength and beauty, visited nearly every day, sometimes alone, sometimes with her playful cubs in tow, and a rhythm developed. He left food, mostly raw meat and fish, at the edge of the forest, careful never to approach, and in return, they allowed him to observe, to photograph, to become a silent part of their world. Daniel stopped posting online, stopped inviting friends over, afraid that any exposure could put them at risk, for he knew what poachers would pay for a white tiger, knew how fragile this sanctuary truly was, so he chose secrecy over fame, wonder over wealth, until one night just before a late autumn frost, the balance shattered. He awoke to the sound of gunshots echoing through the valley, and his blood turned cold as he threw on boots and sprinted into the woods, flashlight in one hand, rifle in the other, heart screaming louder than his footsteps. And when he reached the clearing near the old well, what he saw made his stomach twist. Poachers, 5 of them, armed and laughing, standing over a cage where one of the cubs cowered, blood on its paw and fear in its eyes, while another man poked at it with a stick, jeering, and Naira was there too, shot in the shoulder but still standing, growling low and deadly, circling like a wounded lioness guarding her child. Daniel didn't think. He raised his rifle and fired into the air, shouting with a fury he didn't know he had. And in the chaos that followed, screams, swearing, one man firing blindly, Naira lunged despite her wound, moving like white lightning, scattering them like dry leaves. Daniel shot out the cage lock, grabbed the injured cub, and ran, Naira limping behind him as they disappeared into the trees, leaving behind broken traps and bloodied footprint